What's up, Windwalkers? Today, I thought I would make a sort of PTR update video to discuss my thoughts on Windwalker going into the next tier, the highs, the lows, and the few bits and bobs in between. Now, before we get into things, it is worthwhile mentioning that the PTR cycle is still ongoing, and there are likely to be more changes, so take what I say with a slight grain of salt. It never hurts to be a bit prudent about what some random content creator yaps about when it comes to your favourite spec. Now, for those of you that haven't dabbled on the PTR and have just checked up on the patch notes here and there, you're likely under the impression that there's been almost no changes to Windwalker at all. Besides the buff to Mystic Touch that was swiftly reverted due to community feedback, you wouldn't actually be that far off. When I compare this PTR cycle to the previous one, there has been a huge difference in the transparency and amount of changes that were mentioned and conveyed regarding Windwalker. Now, it isn't inherently a bad thing that we haven't had a ton of mentions in patch notes, however, it does at times feel a bit frustrating to not have anything week after week after week. But we have. Every single reset, Windwalker has had some form of buff or nerf. However, it hasn't been mentioned in the patch notes, and it all relates back to our set pieces. Conduit of the Celestials 4 set has thus far had 3 iterations, and Shadowpan has technically had 1 iteration, with another iteration written in the game, but not actually implemented. In Conduit of the Celestials' current state, I think they've hit the mark. This is a bold statement, but humour me if you will. Conduit has always been about these big burst windows, where your damage skyrockets, and it's almost untouchable before you have to come back to Earth and compete with the mortals outside of your cooldowns. The current iteration is exactly this. I won't go into the meat and potatoes of it just yet, I'll save that for the Windwalker guide, but with stacking cooldown reduction, an almost constant haste buff, and mini burst windows on an exceptionally low cooldown, this feels like what I would envision Conduit at its full potential being. However, there is a downside that concerns me and has been worrying me for a couple of weeks now. All of our power in Season 3 seems to be coming from our tier set. Now, once again, this isn't inherently a bad thing, but outside of tier set strength, we actually have no fundamental changes to our talent tree. Compare this to Season 2, where we had a new strength in single target spinning crane kick, slicing winds a new AoE damaging ability, and quality of life changes to Zuin's Bond, allowing us to truly be a 1-minute 30 spec. As of right now, when live servers drop, nothing changes when it comes to rotation and talents. It isn't until you finally get the 4 set that everything changes. This is when rotation spices up, stat weights start to shift, new talent builds emerge. All eggs are in one basket, and unfortunately, we share this basket with a certain spec that is doing ungodly healing right now. Mistweaver Monk. Mistweaver Monk has also gained the power of this 4 set, and as a result, are popping off. I'm not here to rip into Mistweaver, but I am here to express a concern which worries me. If all of our power is tied into a 4 set that is shared with the best healer in the game right now, well, if our 4 set gets nerfed to disperse their strength, what happens to us? Moving on to Shadowpan, holy shit, it's a mess. Let me start off with an anecdote for this one. Yesterday, I ran a key as Shadowpan Monk after being asked by a viewer. During this key, there was the realization that the 4 set was completely bugged and did not function correctly, making the spec essentially useless. It would have been 2 days since this bug was introduced to the game, and there hasn't been a single mention from any Windwalker about it. I essentially discovered this on stream. The point I'm trying to get across is that no one is currently playing Shadowpan on the PTR. Not only have Blizzard made it extremely confusing over what iteration of tier set they want to go live, but compared to Conduit, it doesn't do any damage. It might be slightly stronger in some raid encounters, but outside of this, it doesn't stand a chance. My biggest gripe with Shadowpan right now is the RNG aspect of it. Like Conduit, I won't go into the meat and potatoes, but every pull will fluctuate in damage based on when you get a Shadow Wisdom of the Wool proc. Get it first, and you'll pump. Get it last, and you'll flop. It feels horrible. Why would I choose to play this over Conduit, which feels exceptionally fun, does exceptional damage, and doesn't require me to have 3 separate weak auras that I have to track at all times? Shadowpan was a hero talent that I used to praise and hype for new players to learn the spec. If it goes out the way it currently works, I don't think it'll be my recommendation any longer, and honestly, that kinda sucks. Alright, how about we go over something a bit more positive now? What if I told you that Conduit of the Celestials no longer cancels itself on the PTR. Yes, you heard that right. No longer will you have the frustration of a half-second channel into cancel into Alt F4. This is a great quality of life feature that's been wanted for months now and finally is in the game. Yet, no mention of it in the patch notes. However, this isn't the only bug fix. Spinning crane kick also no longer cancels. In fact, they've completely reverted spinning crane kick and you can now cast non-channel abilities during its channel and it does not cut off the damage. Huge quality of life and actually really big change, especially for Conduit and its super fast gameplay loop. A big shout out to Tom who helped discover this change and together we checked it out on stream and to my shock, they had truly reverted it. I'm sure there will be some correlations here that ties into Conduit channel cancel bug, but honestly, I don't care. I'm just glad they fixed it. Now, there will have to be some macro changes that come in play because of this change. However, right now, don't worry about it too much. It's still the PTR. I'll cover all of that in the guide. So, where does this leave us? This isn't an in-depth video for the sole reason of the guide being in the works, ready for next season, but I kind of wanted to give you a bit of a taster of what potentially is on the horizon for Windwalker. Conduit, looking better than ever. Shadowpan, extremely worrying in its current state. And the fact that all our power is tied into our tier sets is also a little bit worrying. However, with Conduit channel no longer cancelling, hey, it's something, right? Honestly, it could be worse, but it could also be better. Anyway, I've been Windwalker POV, and I'll catch you in the next one.